Good day. Welcome to another edition of Ebima Mungo's Perspective on Global Affairs. Before I continue, I urge you to please press the like button. And if you're new to my channel, I also urge you to subscribe. I have a question. This time, the question has to do with global peace. Yes, global peace. And when we talk of global peace, who has been more destabilizing for the world? The options are, it's just two. Is it the countries in NATO? Or is it the countries that we now find somehow opposing the activities of NATO? Namely, Russia, China, and Iran. Let me repeat. Who do you find more destabilizing to world peace? Is it the countries in NATO or NATO as a bloc? Or is it these new countries that tend to oppose NATO a lot these days? Namely Russia, China, and Iran. Well, I bring this question up because the NATO Secretary General believes that it's Russia that is the biggest cause of destabilization in the world. Yeah, he believes so. He thinks that, in fact, he believes that going forward, the biggest source of disquiet in the world will be the combination of Russia, North Korea, Iran, and China. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte recently stated, that was today he stated it, that Russia, China, and Iran, along with North Korea, are coordinating their efforts to undermine the global rules and are preparing for long-term confrontation with the West. I don't know what global rules. As an African, I have not heard of us coming together to make a rule that the whole world is supposed to adhere to, especially outside the United Nations framework. So, but he believes that Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran are now working hard towards confronting the West outside the global rules. Rutte made these comments today, November 6, 2025, at the NATO Industry Forum in Bucharest. He urged NATO members to increase production. In fact, Rutte made something he revealed something very important. He said collectively now, the whole NATO countries are now outproducing Russia in military weaponry. We know that since this war came out, when it comes to artillery, the Russians produce what the whole of NATO produces in a year. The Russians produce it in just about 2 months. When it comes to so many other weapon systems, tanks, aeroplanes, we keep seeing how the Russians are getting new deliveries of Su-34, Su-35. They keep some secret. They don't tell us how much Su-57 they deliver. We see new submarines. We see so many weapon systems. But Mark Rutte believes that NATO has caught up and is now outperforming Russia. So NATO Secretary General believes that there should be coordinated effort to confront Russia. In fact, it may just be necessary for me to share what he was saying here now.
To undermine the global rules. As you know, it is working with China, with North Korea, with Iran and others. They are increasing their defense industrial collaboration to unprecedented levels. They are preparing for long-term confrontation. We cannot be naive. We must be prepared. President Roosevelt famously said that powerful enemies must be outfought and outproduced. And that was in 1942. And the same can be said today. And Russia is not alone.
So we now find out that as a powerful enemy, NATO is determined to outproduce and outfight Russia. But in this particular case here now, it's Russia, China, and North Korea and Iran. I'd like to get your opinion on this proposition, if you think it's something that is possible. But the use of the term global rules, the global rules here obviously are the rules set by NATO by themselves. Because Maria Zakharova, the spokesperson of the Foreign Ministry of Russia, she didn't waste time. She put out a Telegram post. I should always tell you, Telegram is very popular in that Russia, Ukraine, Eastern Europe space. In fact, it's so popular in some countries that Durov, the owner of Telegraph, is not particularly a friend of the West. He was arrested recently when he went to France, but he holds multiple passports, UAE, Russian, and French passports. So he used one of his passports to get his freedom. Anyway, Maria Zakharova said, what global rules is Rotate referring to? She should put the full list of these global rules. He should put those full list of the global rules on the NATO website so that we can be very sure of the particular rules he's talking about. But while he was going out there and talking about how we should prepare, the West should be very prepared about dealing with with the Russians and the Chinese, President Zelensky did something very, very strong to deal decisively with the Russians. He sanctioned the Russians today. Yes. President Zelensky has placed sanctions on Russia. Yes, I may need to share this also. President Zelensky in a tweet today said, "Today we have introduced a new sanctions package zeroing on Russia's activities in the Arctic. This is one of Russia's cash cows. A significant portion of the resources the enemy sells each year are extracted precisely from the lands and waters of the Arctic, tens of billions of dollars annually. We are working with partners so that just as measures have been implemented against tanker fleet and Russia's oil companies, similar actions will be taken by them against all the volumes of resources the Russians sell from the Arctic. This is fair. Any means of curbing Russia's revenue is an effective way of to counter the war." President Zelensky is not joking. If he cannot cripple the Russians in the battlefields, he will cripple their economy with the active aid and support of his partners. We don't seem to be hearing so much of these partners these days. They have their own issues. Partners in France, partners in Britain, Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron, partners in Germany, Friedrich Merz. They have clear and present domestic challenges. So, but Zelensky is not unrelenting. But while he is sanctioning the Russians don't seem to be very concerned about it. Yes, they are moving on in typical Russian manner, degrading the Ukrainian army, and finally, it is very clear that Pokrovst has fallen. Pokrovst has fallen because the Russians now control well over 90, 95, if not 100% of it. What is just left is some clearing out, as mapping agencies tell us, just some clearing out of the various parts of Pokrovsk that are still pockets of of Ukrainian soldiers. Many of them are heading east towards Mirnograd. And many also are surrendering. But Pokrovsk effectively has been overrun. That is what all the mapping agencies are now saying, and it is very clear. Images of the surrender of some soldiers came out recently from the Pokrovsk area. To affirm, they identify themselves. They identify themselves as soldiers in the
Sanctions Микола Володимирович, 25-та штурмова бригада в Покровську.
Долженко Артем Николаевич, 68-я бригада.
Николаев Андрей Сергеевич, 32-я бригада, Покровск.
Колесник Андрій Миколаївич, 79-та бригада. У полон потрапив у Покровську.
Well, Zelensky is sanctioning the Russian state, but his soldiers are voting with their feet. They are surrendering. I think they have finally come to the realization that they've been abandoned. Many of them who were caught and who surrendered were talking about how they felt abandoned because they weren't getting any supplies anymore. But how will they get supplies? The Russians said it long ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, that they have practically cut off all logistic supplies to the Ukrainian soldiers in Pokrovsk. And at that moment that they were sure that they had complete encirclement because there was nothing coming into Pokrovsk again. It was a siege. I have always stated how I am a fan of the Ottoman Empire. One of the great things the Ottoman campaigns used to do was they were very good at encircling and laying siege to cities. That was how they conquered Constantinople, and that was how ultimately they almost conquered Vienna, but the Viennese were much more a hard nut to crack, especially for Suleiman the Magnificent. He didn't achieve it. But definitely, the Russians are very good at it. They are masters in it. They have done it in so many cities, and they have concluded in the city of Pokrovsk, and they have just a little pocket in Mirnograd that is almost that is where the remaining soldiers in Russia Ukrainian soldiers are beginning to settle. But why is Pokrovsk important? Why is this Pokrovsk always talked about? Pokrovsk is the most fortified in all of the whole of the part of Ukraine remaining. It is. It's a logistic hub. Pokrovsk is important because strategic road and road junction, eastern Ukraine's Donetsk Oblast, that serves as a major logistic hub. Control of the city is very vital to the Russians. They've been on it for quite a while. They chose not to go full on onto the taking Pokrovsk. So what did they do? They decided to start encircling Pokrovsk. That project took a long time. They went through the east and through the northeast, the south, and the Russians made sure that they didn't get successes, especially in the western city of Odache. They did a good job of holding off the Russians, but ultimately the Russians broke them, stepped on the pedal, and then started to move into encircling Pokrovsk completely. And one of the reasons Pokrovsk is very important is that Pokrovsk is where they have a special, a unique kind of coal. Yes. That coal is what is used in the steel industry. Coking coal. It is in Pokrovsk, they have a lot of it. We should remember that the whole of the Donbass is very rich in coal. It's one of the richest parts of Ukraine. In fact, that's the industrial heartbeat of Ukraine. And now they've lost it. They've lost it. We heard the other time, we saw how they lost Shevchenko And there we know they have the largest lithium mine in the world, lithium reserves in the world, one of the largest in the world. Now they've lost Pokrovst. And it is now clear that from Pokrovsk, they will now move into cities like Kramatorsk and Sloviansk. The Russians are doing what the Russians do. And this time in the age of drones, they try as much as they can to limit their casualties. Although in these last few phases of the war, the last month or few weeks, they had to send in armored columns, if for nothing else, in sending troops to the front. The Ukrainians had a lot of successes destroying some of these armored columns, and they put it out there in the internet, creating the impression that they were in control of things, but it wasn't so. Kupiansk is falling. Russian forces continue to make advances along the Kharkiv border north of Kupiansk. They have managed to flank the small settlement of Dovrachansky and have created a small pocket around that neighborhood, 25 miles away, 25 kilometers square around it. 25 kilometers square. They've encircled it. They are about to start to put a squeeze on Kupiansk. Russia is doing what Russia does, and Russia is taking care of business. But we should know that Russia has suffered a very excruciating regime of sanctions from Zelensky today. It will pile on the other 19 rounds of sanctions that the European Union has put against them, and the various suites of sanctions that the American state has also put against Russia, including the latest one, the sanctions against the two oil companies, Lukoil and Rosneft. But the Americans are playing another kind of game. President Trump may just feel that he needs to completely break the chokehold of the second pole in the multipolar world, China, on some of these rare earth metals that have stymied the ability of America to produce what America likes to produce. Wonderful F-16s, F-35s, B-2 bombers, B-52 bombers. America loves weaponry. Ohio-class submarines, Nimitz-class, Ford-class aircraft carriers. All those carriers, Patriot missiles, THAAD missiles, they came crashing in their production numbers when they were confronted with the reality that they had no rare earth metals to create important components. So that forced President Trump to renegotiate with a trade foe he looked down disdainfully on in his first term, that he has come to see as a very formidable adversary in his second term. So today, what did President Trump do? Following what he had done recently, he went to an ASEAN conference, met with a group of countries. He began to like all these group meetings now. He was not a fan of it, but he now sees that it's best you go into a group. So he went to ASEAN. He went to South Korea too, but he did not take part in the APEC conference. But today he had a summit. He had a summit. A very important summit in the White House. I was watching that summit just before I started this video. The summit was between the presidents that formed the C5+1. The C5+1 is United States and the 5 Central Asian states, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. What do these countries have in common? They are all countries in the Commonwealth of Independent States, remnants of the former Soviet Union. They were all 4 Soviet states. They are all in Central Asia. and they all have very formidable relationship with Russia. But these states too, is one of the great things about the 5 Central Asian states is that they are the most savvy of all the geopolitical players on earth today. Why do I say that? These states are caught between 2 juggernauts, China and Russia. China, they would like to have relationship with economic. Russia, they have had historical relationship with. But they've also been courted very aggressively by the CIA, the MI6, and, the people who send them, United States and Britain and the collective West, because in the case of Kazakhstan, they have large reserves of oil, vast reserves of oil. Shell, the usual players, BP, Mobil, Exxon, they love Kazakhstan, and they have relationship in Kazakhstan. The Central Asian presidents have learned to act like trees that bend to the wind. They last longer. They bend to the wind. They're not stiff. They're not focused on one goal. When the Americans come, they play with the Americans. When the British come, they play with the British. But one thing they've always done is that they've anchored their geopolitical and security relationship with Russia. In fact, Topolev, the president of Kazakhstan, was almost on the verge of being toppled a few years back, and it was President Putin who rolled in some Russian troops and tanks. The demonstrators and NGOs and them all just frittered away when the Russians came to town. So they have a good game they play with the big powers. The Russians in this new dispensation have come to appreciate the fact that they need to give the Central Asian countries some space. So there's been improved relationship between the Central Asian countries and China. The Belt and Road, we know it, the Belt and Road, trains particularly, the Europe-China trains, China-Europe trains, they almost always pass through all the countries of the Central Asian countries, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan. They all end up in Düsseldorf and end up also going now to Iran. They go to Turkey. They go everywhere. They pass through the central. They can't leave China without and get to Europe or get to Eastern Asia, Central Asia and Iran without passing through those countries. So the Russians have allowed them to have a better relationship, economic relationship. And that relationship has blossomed because there's a cultural link between the countries. They're all Turkic. They all have history with it, the Ottoman Empire. And they also have great relationship with the western part of China, Xinjiang. So Xinjiang has become a hub for trade, and that trade is now almost $250 billion. The Chinese don't play. They bring something to the table. So it's a win-win proposition for China, and it's a win-win proposition for Russia. Their economic well-being is being taken care of. That way, they don't look to the West and think that it is the West that will be very good to them. But today, President Trump had a meeting with them, and he was talking about critical minerals, rare earth metals. He wants to remove the stranglehold of the Chinese. So he was talking about rare earth metals. He had a long talk with them today. He met with President Tokayev. He met with all the presidents of basically. He met with all of them. I watched it. It was a good one. And at the time I was making this video, a statement had not come out of it. But one of the things the Tajikistan president was talking about is how they have helped America to get away from the sanctions or the export controls of the Chinese regarding anti-money. Very important in the production of artillery shells. But like I said, those countries know that their security architecture is very much anchored with the Russians. But one country that has practically broken itself away from the Russians says that they're not doing again. Well, as we say in Pidgin English in Nigeria, and they do again. That simply means they won't have anything to do with Russia anymore. They've been showing it, and they did it recently when we saw their role and involvement in Operation Spiderweb. And that's Azerbaijan. Today, Azerbaijan hosted the first ever NATO delegation in Baku. That's the capital of Azerbaijan. On November 6, President Ilham Aliyev of Azerbaijan received a high-level NATO delegation in Baku for discussions on cooperation and regional security. The delegation included permanent representatives of NATO from over a dozen neighboring countries, including Turkey, Greece, Hungary, Norway, Portugal, and Spain, among others, as well as deputy permanent representatives of the United States. In that forum, after that meeting, one of the things that Aliyev said was that they will now move their security and integrate it with NATO. They are going to break away from Soviet security weaponry. They will get more new NATO-compliant weapons. They're not doing any Russian things anymore. We know that the Ukraine war has really impacted the relationship. And the last meeting, the CSO meeting in Shanghai, President Putin did all he could to repair relationship with Aliyev. But Aliyev's mind has already been made up. He's already close now to Turkey. And the relationship also with Armenia has meant that those countries of the Central Caucasus have practically made their mind to leave the orbit of Russia and move closer to Turkey and ultimately NATO. As for regards to the talks, that's practically an expansion without shooting a bullet of the Ottoman Empire. But the Russians will be watching this with concern. I want to end my video today with something very spectacular. Elon Musk, my African brother in America, but we're very far away. He's from South Africa, I'm from Nigeria. He has found his way very well, very well. He has found his way. Today, the board of Tesla voted that they are going to approve $1 trillion to him if he can achieve some milestones over the course of 10 years. $1 trillion. He has actually grown to being the billionaire he is this way by achieving milestones for Tesla. But this one now is all the terms of the milestones he's supposed to meet are stated in this agreement. He should be able to sell a certain amount of cars. Some of them should be robo cars. Some of them should have this. They set a performance metrics for him, but it's $1 trillion. But why am I bringing up Elon Musk in the discussion of geopolitics? Elon Musk is very much important in geopolitics. If you live in Africa, you will know what Starlink does for you, especially a country like Nigeria and all those countries that are challenged by disruptions in availability of broadband. Starlink is selling more now in Malawi, in Zimbabwe, in Nigeria, and all these other countries than they even sell in America. It will shock you. But if any country has been a big beneficiary of Starlink, it will be Ukraine. Ukraine has used Starlink in helping their campaign, but it has also furthered their ability to do harm to the Russians in their drones, long-range drones particularly, but definitely in the sea drones that have chased the whole Russian Black Sea fleet to be quarantined within the Sea of Azov. Elon Musk plays a role. But today, it also emerged that the Pentagon, after scouring through the whole landscape of who will supposedly be able, the companies that can build the dome and the sky dome that President Trump has said he wants to have a shield, an air defense shield for America, like in the manner of the Israeli Iron Sling and Iron Dome. It was Elon Musk that they finally met. Starlink has been given a contract, as I read. I've not got the full details of it, but who can do that? We see how Starlink, SpaceX has deliverables. They have technology that is the only, they are the only company in the world. Not even the Chinese can do it, not even the Russians, that have reusable rockets. They are very good and they are very high advanced in modern rocketry. They are no other country. And what is an intercontinental ballistic missile and what are missile projectors? They all use the technology of rocketry, and Elon Musk is way ahead of it. He is valued now at close to $500 billion. The good thing about him is that Tesla may be the one company we all know, but Tesla is not the company that gives him most of his wealth. Tesla gives him the wealth that is attributed to him on the stock exchange. But he has not let anybody in. He owns Starlink, he owns SpaceX, he owns Neuralink, all by himself. Yeah, all these other companies, he made sure that they have no players from Wall Street. The only place where Wall Street has a hand in his businesses is in Tesla. And it is Tesla that has said that they're going to give him $1 trillion if he manages to make it. Anyway, this is where I end my video for today. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe. If you have any views regarding the opinions I just expressed, put them in the comment section. Do well to like and share. Until my next video, you have a good day.